In March 1981, the world saw the release of Marvel's Dazzler #1. Previously a bit part player in the X-Men comics, Dazzler, aka Alison Blair, was given her very own run. And with that came a front cover to behold. From the get-go, artist Bob Larkin, known for his hand-painted style, had become famous for his striking, pulpy inks, through runs of Doc Savage and notably fellow Marvel title, The Incredible Hulk. Larkin had become synonymous with the use of bright colour in amongst the bland and the dark, to direct his audience's eye like a lighthouse, with his Dazzler cover being no less an example of his craft. I'd known about this comic book for a little while now, and I always noted how cool I thought the cover art was. And then finally last month, compelled and purposely deciding to do no further reading into the actual content of what Dazzler even was, I went and bought a copy of eBay simply so I could have it near me and to show friends when they came around. I love the incredibly dated and oh so cliche comic book adverts you get on the very first page of the book. And that distinct dated smell of the pages, the sandy touch of the paper and the quite literal age that has drowned them, the coffee-stained shade of brown and the dog-eared corners that have been thumbed through by God knows how many readers before me. Going out on a limb, I'm confident in saying that this is my favourite ever front cover of a comic book. It's weird, and it's alien, and it's campy, and it's a total callback to a bygone era, and I couldn't love it more for that. And personally, I'd say that the following story's weakness only makes me want to love the cover even more. Dazzler, determined to make it as a professional singer, pops from the page in a white onesuit atop roller skates. She sports chains and blow-dried hair with a chrome microphone in hand, alongside its bejeweled main title, working almost as its own headliner act. Naturally, Dazzler sparkles, and Larkin has encompassed that nightlife and energy associated with the time into his art. Reaching out to the man himself via email, Bob said this: John Romita Jr. had worked out her costume and editor Louise Simonson approached me to do the cover. I was first choice because I was doing a lot of #1 black and white cover magazines for Marvel starting in 73 and 74. It was simple. Louise asked me to do Dazzler over her whole costume, microphone, disco ball around her neck and her roller skates. I had 4 other characters, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Thing and such. I don't remember doing a sketch for her. Marvel trusted me to do the right thing. I shot a model in a bathing suit with my photographer Bob Ozanich, went home to my studio and started drawing. Within a couple of days it was finished. I got the painting into Manhattan up to Marvel. They loved it and gave me my next cover to do. It's like a scene out of Boogie Nights, really, and just like that film you can smell it in the air and you can feel just how artificial the lighting is. This character is showcased as this it girl. She's calendar-esque, which comes with the territory of her image being based on actress Bo Derek after her performance in the comedy movie 10.
Tom DeFalco came up to me and said, we have to create a character that goes to clubs. And hanging out in New York in the 70s and the 80s at clubs, I saw Grace Jones. That's the first thing I thought of. Her hair was buzzed. She was stunningly beautiful, statuesque, wore this skin-tight lame outfit. She was on skates. I said, this is the character. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Bo Derek had done 10, and she was the biggest star in the world at the time.
What astounds me so much about this cover is that it doesn't require anything more than its protagonist simply being there. There's no promise of some game-changing comic book brawl or even font telling us what we should expect. As the model stands entirely on her own, this mural is all parts beautiful, cheesy, and sleazy. It's a disco ball of a throwback, knocking down the pins of our perspective. Rather like the 1970s and 80s, it's jarring and very much of its own style. It's ABBA, it's multicolored, it's big and obnoxious jukeboxes and circular vinyl. And it all comes from Bob Larkin's background in creating posters for films. Just looking through his work for Hollywood on fellow 70s titles like Piranha and Kingdom of the Spiders, particularly low-budget schlocky B-movies, one can see how his artwork translated so perfectly to the world of comics in general. And with Dazzler, it screams of a join-the-dot look back at the 70s decade milieu. It's pure, time-framed gimmick worldview. Dazzler is wearing Nike and listening to her Walkman whilst drinking Pepsi in slow motion and saying, "Here I am."
Terrific!
That's joy.
Dazzler is a product of a time. And whilst not directly the exact sort of product that filmmakers like Anderson and Linklater were looking back at, harnessing and, yes, fetishizing. Nostalgia is a powerful thing. especially for the 80s right now, as filmmakers have forgotten enough about a time to remember it fondly. Dazzler's cover and the comic's content itself is very much, and stealing from Boogie Nights again here, a money shot of the 1970s and early 80s. A very specific viewpoint of an in-your-face onomatopoeia of a decade, more than willing to highlight and promote its own gimmicks and time staples. The Dazzler does its best to be a reminder of that, a loud air freshener of a memory of what that time was. You can basically hear it, it's disco and it's karaoke, with a major influence of Saturday Night Fever, having hit cinemas just 2 years before the cover was conceived in 1979. We see Marvel's guest stars also feature on the front of almost a kitschy American chat show feel to them. Dazzler was originally conceived as a movie/record/comic tie-in with Casablanca Records, keen to capitalize on fellow client band Kiss's megalomania approach to branding and merchandise, and instead here reverse engineering the idea of a fictional character. Casablanca struck a deal with Marvel to create Dazzler, and we got the Tom DeFalco, John Romita Jr. take that would last 42 issues until March 1986. So keen to push forward with this character, a spec script for a Dazzler live-action piece intended for Casablanca to produce was written by Marvel's editor Jim Shooter over a weekend, with the view then to become a feature. But Shooter said on his eye-opening blog post, Casablanca was being bought out and accounting properties were being alleged. The project fell into limbo. And while this #1 comic itself is frankly very forgettable and includes no less than 12 guest stars, 12, including Beast, Spider-Man, the Avengers and the X-Men, all of them mind you, not to mention the comic's would-be villain Enchantress, the story is bloated. It gives off a feeling of unconfidence in its own hero, and with this inclusion of special guest stars receding throughout the series' 42-episode run. Talking about issue 2 and following more of these indulgent problems with guest stars, DeFalco said this: "We had like 34 superheroes in this book? I don't remember what it was, some outrageous number. Casablanca liked all the introductory scenes where all the characters were introduced, but they just didn't see any need for a fight scene." And looking back at this comic now, it does beg the question as to who the character was actually aimed at in the first place. This comic feels like a T for teen in block capital letters. It has an easy breezy, almost romance comic feel to it. The vibe suggests that its main character is perhaps aimed at young girls, with its retelling of school dances, father issues, and an emphasis on performance and singing.
She was a singer who could make light shows, which made her kind of a cool novelty factor for the 80s, where a mutant was anybody who could do anything that a human couldn't do, really. And let's face it, light shows and singing, being a pop star who can make light shows and fireworks in the 80s was kind of the ultimate dream. Secret. Yeah, it was like the ultimate dream. As I said in the intro, it was the dream of the 80s.
And while the X-Men comics were born out of the civil rights movement, Dazzler arrived far later.
No more mutants! No more mutants!
And in a time where talent in America was sold like gold dust and snorted up and consumed like cocaine. Dazzler, unlike the X-Men, suggests that one use their uniqueness and speciality for personal gain as opposed to helping the good of mankind. Dazzler is a character that again quite literally sparkles, whose main power is a manipulation of light through sound or music even. However, that itself comes off as a mere side note in the fact that Allison really just wants to make it as a singer. This is a character who would go on to turn down a position with the X-Men repeatedly to instead focus on a career. Something so very uncharacteristic of a comic book hero. Digging a little deeper, you could even argue that it's a comic and an intro to a character that takes in celebrity culture, and with that a consumerism. Something that I feel was probably not intentional, but rather adds a little weight to an otherwise light story.
It's very critical, and if I don't look good one day, we don't have a very good day usually.
And while Dazzler has always been stuck in an obscure fan favourite sort of limbo, there is still a call for the character, making regular enough appearances in other comic books like 2015's A-Force. She has remained a huge mainstay in the queer community for her themes as well, following her dreams, an eye for fashion, and being told to condition by disapproving parental figures and peers, making it easy to see why it is a character that this group can relate to. And with a redesign in 2018 and an appearance in the X-Men Dark Phoenix feature film in 2019, the Dazzler name still holds a level of meaning behind it. For better or worse, you can't help but feel that Dazzler is simply a product of its time. Holding her back and keeping her chained is a funkadelic ghost of Christmas past, jiving and bopping to an outdated beat. From this first iteration to the very last, the character of Dazzler comes off as an advert, cooked up by commercial companies to cash in on a trend that was on its way out and becoming very stale. While her look alone is something that both immediately dates the character while simultaneously acting as a time capsule as well, she and this cover introducing her, if nothing else, is a fantastic and awe-inspiring product of its time. In this case, I'm glad I read a book by its cover. Hello there! If you've made it this far into the video, it's clearly been at least somewhat engaging, and so you might as well give me a like at this point, and hey, why not subscribe for more things? I'm really looking to take the channel in this direction for the foreseeable future, whilst I can't go outside and have no job. And I've got upcoming original essays on Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, I'm going to do The Simpsons, and we're going to look at Wes Anderson's Rushmore as well. And hopefully, if they're received well, there'll be even more in the future. That's it for now. Thank you for watching.